6:07. This will be the first time you've heard me speak at this meeting, so I'll introduce myself for those of you that don't know my name. My name is Mike Hale. I'm one of the two assistant chiefs at the police department, and Greg Terry, unfortunately, is not able to be here tonight. He's away at a training class, so I'm representing for him. So tonight will be a busy night. We've got a full agenda, and it looks like we do have a quorum as far as the number of people here. So we're going to go over the minutes in the last two CAP meetings. So I'll start off with the April 11th CAP meeting. I'll just each of you have been emailed this, as well as the May meeting. And so I will just briefly remind a few of you what we talked about. At that meeting, we had discussion over current policies, proposed policies, documents that were requested, and a few other things. So can I get someone to make a motion to approve the April 11th?
I'll make a motion to approve.
There's a motion, someone to second? Okay, Robert, thank you. All right, so the next piece of the puzzle is the meeting from May 9th. On that one, we talked about the Canine policy, talked about which is the presentation from Sergeant Ryan McWilliams, and we talked about a collaborative report. And at that particular meeting, we didn't have a quorum, so we pushed that to this one. And can I get a motion to approve May meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, Robert, thank you. All right, so tonight we have one presentation from Lieutenant Ryan Croker, who you've heard a number of times, so you'll be familiar with him. And then I'm going to come back up here and talk to you about the canine policy, and that'll be it. So I will turn it over to Ryan Croker, and enjoy.
So we have two plans. I have the original strategic plan that we presented back in, I think it was March, and then I have an updated one. Has anybody who has not gotten one? That's the original. So while Chief Helen and Andy are handing those things out, I wanted to try to be very, very intentional to try to present information back in a timely and effective manner that's not confusing. So one of the things that we're going to do is, so you have the old plan, which was the original plan that was presented, that we received recommendations on, and then you have the proposed plan that includes many of the suggestions that you guys all provided with us, which we greatly appreciate. Most of it was very exhaustive. I know there was a ton of work, and we greatly, greatly appreciate it. I have a presentation, and for the sake of the presentation, because we implemented the majority of the recommendations that y'all made, I felt it would be most easy if we just talked about the things that maybe we didn't add, because some of the information that you guys gave us, we thought was very, very valuable. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll open up some questions afterwards, and hopefully it's efficient and it makes sense. It made sense to me, but just because it made sense to me doesn't mean it's going to make sense to you. So here we go. Goal 1. So the group that was assigned goal 1, which is strengthen community connections. Initially, if you guys can see, we had that one goal with 8 objectives. What group 1 did was they actually condensed it and moved it down into the same goal with 3 different objectives. We saw that those objectives actually were very much in line with what we wanted to be completed, and it made it much more streamlined. There were some additional things that were added in there. And if you can see as you go through the new, or the proposed one that you guys have in front of you, we changed a couple of things. One of the things, because I think this is in line with some of the questions that were asked, is we had goal 1, then we had objective 1, and then we had different objectives just kind of outline some of the areas that we wanted to make happen. And then we had at the bottom metrics, right? We talked about metrics were the things that we were going to use to help measure and see if we are meeting the goal. So we changed it a little bit. And what we did was we kept the goal, we kept each objective that group 1 provided with us, the 3, and then we changed the objective, the second objective, into strategies. And we listed specific strategies that we believe were going to help us complete the objective, which will then help complete the goal. And then the metrics we are going to utilize, so the metrics will be the measurements that we can determine, are those meeting the strategies, which are then meeting the objective, which are then meeting the goals. So we listed much of that in there. The majority of the things from goal 1, objective 1, were added into the strategic plan. One of the things that we didn't add in verbatim, but we kind of somewhat incorporated, was the suggestion of to reduce the number of BPD officers at community events in uniform or displaying a firearm at community events. Now remember, this is the strategic plan, it's kind of a guide, so we didn't want to incorporate that in there, but what we wanted to do is be intentional to be at least give us some leeway, because there are certain events where maybe we need more officers. There are certain events where having a firearm may be beneficial, but reducing may not always be the best thing for us and for the community. So what I did was, is if you look on strategies, on goal 1, objective 1, on the bottom left, it says, consider the effect of the amount of officers and uniforms worn by the officers in attendance. So there may be some community events where it may be beneficial to have officers in plain clothes. There may be some community events where we want officers in full uniform, some officers in training uniform. So that was one of the reasons why we didn't want to completely just blanketly put that in there, because we wanted to have some leeway, and we felt that still hopefully met what the recommendations were by group 1. If you go to goal 1, objective 2, which was, goal 1 is still strengthen community connections. Goal 2 was to develop and implement a transparent communication portal. So there were a lot of recommendations that were made. We accepted and recognized that many of those were very, very valid. There were a couple that as we look at, I didn't necessarily think that maybe they applied directly to community engagement. Specifically, if you look at up here on where it says 1, an interactive BPD transparency page, including transparency about civil and criminal litigation against BPD officers, with individual links to relevant court findings, complaints, answers, etc., and about all pitches motions filed, which seek disclosure related to BPD officers' names and issue and links, and so forth. Number 2 has additional resources and link to relevant information and services for the community, and it has links to the DOJ, racial justice, and link from ACLU. Those things are valuable, but as it relates to a community engagement portal, some of the things that we're trying to do and what the stipulated agreement asks us to do is to provide ease of access for people to provide information to us and for us then to respond. Now, our Internal Affairs Division, I'll talk about this in a minute, is working on a portal and is working on a page specifically related to officer-related misconduct issues, public information to certain reports, and public information to certain types of cases and findings, which that may potentially be something that's viable when that particular portal gets up, but we didn't feel like it was necessarily relevant to the community engagement section as it relates to the stipulated agreement. Number 3, ensure that all feedback, including complaints, receive a prompt confirmation through impartial investigation and timely response to the complaint. And you guys referenced 137 of the stipulated agreement. That's an internal affairs section, and what you're going to hopefully see as we progress and begin really getting into the legwork of what the community advisory panel is designed to do is we're going to see a lot of these changes made within the organization where our internal affairs policy is updated, the internal affairs portal that's going to be updated, these different things that are going to be made available to the public to see, and also ensure that we are doing these things. But as it relates to community engagement, we think that's a little bit different than what the transparency portal is designed to do. Goal 1, objective 2, it also mentioned on number 4, proactively monitor and investigate complaints, including through non-traditional sources of complaints such as internet posting of a video by a community member depicting or alleging officer misconduct, high number of complaints against officers, or where the only arrest charge is resisting arrest. And then 5, take appropriate corrective measures to prevent the type of misconduct, including additional training in the partnership with the community. And then 6, conduct a biannual survey to improve and positive interaction with the community. Again, these are kind of internal affairs-based incidents that we are working towards, which I think will probably be implemented in some source, because one of the things that our internal affairs division does and will continue to and hopefully get better at is receiving complaints accurately and thoroughly. We're actually working on an IA portal where people can fill out complaints online directly, and it's a link that's accessed where people don't have to go and necessarily call or email or mail it in. We're trying to make it as easy as possible, and many of those things are going to be, I think, that you're asking for are going to be done here in the near future as we continue to work through the stipulated agreement. Goal 1, Objective 3, which is strengthen community connections, which really had to deal with the increasement of BPD personnel and participation in community events. We think that is a very, very valid and great goal. We had it as a specific section. This one kind of, the information you guys provided was a little more streamlined, which we appreciate. One of the things we added, if you look under the strategy section, is internally, we have some work to do to make sure that we are having people through all different ranks and units and departments throughout the organization attend community events, because we know that's where a lot of the engagement occurs. So one of the things that we're going to do to emphasize this, that we added into the strategic plan, was to emphasize to BPD employees how community trust towards law enforcement relates to lower levels of crime. And then how are we going to do that? We're going to highlight the importance of community engagement in employee performance evaluations. Right now, if one of our officers gets an evaluation, there's really nothing in that evaluation that relates to community engagement. We recognize that if we want our officers to participate, we want them to come, one, for the right reasons, because they want to engage with the community, but also that that's going to be something that they're going to be graded on, because all of our employees get an evaluation every year. And we want that to be one of the measuring units that we determine what is a good police officer. Are they meeting the standards and exceeding them? How you engage with the community, not just showing up to events, but how are you engaging with community members on calls for service and those types of things. So that's one of the things that we're going to implement organizationally to make sure that we're meeting that goal of strengthening community connections through getting our officers out there. And then thirdly, it says emphasize the importance of community engagement as a key attribute in promotional opportunities. So if you want to promote to a leadership position or position within the organization, there needs to be some kind of community engagement component to it. Again, it incentivizes or reaffirms the culture that we want as an organization, and that you, I believe, want as a community, that our officers are voluntarily and willing and wanting to engage the community. Again, it's going to be incorporated in the evaluation system, and again, incorporated in the ability to promote. So all the suggestions that you guys provided on that were added into this current draft. Goal 2, which is educate and involve the community in the training of police personnel. So if you look at Goal 2, there was some language that was requested specifically as it relates to identifying specific community groups or people who would be, that we could partner with to actually produce the training. And so we included that in some of the language on Goal 2, Objective 1. And then in the strategy section, identifying that we are actively going to seek out and identify community members with a variety of experience that would participate in the training, and then partner with community professionals, and then specifically related to the suggestion that was provided to us through educational institutions, criminal justice stakeholders, and subject matter experts to select instructors. Initially, it was a little bit broad, and we wanted to condense it based on the recommendation. We felt that was a very valid question to have. On the second objective of Goal 2, which is to provide forums and trainings to teach community members and groups on BPD laws and processes. Again, we were instead of just kind of keeping it very broad, we kind of narrowed it down a little bit. So specifically, how are we going to do that? I think what initially we had is have community academies. So now we're committing to having 2 community academies a year. Another mechanism that is a good platform for our community and the police officers to get together and interact, so we can Those birds keep bouncing into that window. The Community Academy is just a great mechanism to create that kind of dialogue. So how are we going to do that? Again, we're gonna use all of our social media, and community events to recruit membership into that Community Academy. And we're gonna partner. One of the things, objective 2 that was asked is, how are we going to identify, or who are we going to partner with to do this, to seek out community membership for the Community Academy. So partner with educational institutions, criminal justice stakeholders, and community-based organizations to assist with the recruitment. I think traditionally a lot of the stuff that we did was really based on us, really trying to we're gonna go out there and kind of whiten up and try to go out there and really try to reach as many people as we can, but we recognize that to really truly make it effective, this is a group effort, it's a community effort, and identifying specific community groups, not limited to, but groups that we can go to regularly as trusted messengers to go out and deliver the message to help in our recruitment efforts. And the metrics that we talked about in there, we added in a metric about identifying where the participants in the Community Academy receive the information about it. So we can kind of judge and see where are we getting the people from. Goal 3 was to create, promote, and enhance youth-focused prevention and intervention programs. There were 2 objectives. Objective 1 was to continue to invest in and expand the Junior Police Academy, which is one of our core youth programs that's actually going on right now. Today is day 2 for our youths. One of the questions that was asked is to identify youth, so I believe we identified kind of more specific age frame. But one of the things that was asked is for each objective, define, describe existing activities, and then new activities to be undertaken as a result of a stipulated agreement, and the 21st Century Report documents, and show that what department is doing and what it intends to do in the future. So the strategic plan is kind of the guide of what we're going to do. Then we're going to have an annual report that comes out that's going to document all of these things. So we will have a document that comes out yearly as it relates to community engagement, what we've done, where we've gone, how many people we've reached, these metrics that we've talked about, what those look like, have we met those, where are they at, and then from year to year we'll be able to see, what's taking place. So that wasn't added in there because it's going to be added somewhere else in the annual report. And then goal 4. So goal 4 was to engage a community advisory panel and utilize community surveys and other feedback tools. So objective 1 was to use the CAP, which is yourselves, to review community engagement strategies and provide feedback. So group 4 kind of provided some general themes as to what they thought. Some of the things was utilize the CAP as trusted messengers, utilizing the CAP as people who could go out and do and reach that portion of the community that we maybe can't, and we 100% agree. It talked about engaging early and often and authentically. So some of that language was added in there. There wasn't anything specific from group 4 as to, hey, you need to change this or need to change that. But I think it was general themes that I gathered from reading it. I'd be interested to hear from group 4 here momentarily as to some of your thoughts. But one of the things it asked to do is to define community engagement. So if you go to, I believe it's the 2nd or 3rd page, Chief Terry actually in his statement in the strategic plan defined what he believes community engagement through the Bakersfield Police Department to be. So hopefully that, if you guys can read it, is consistent with what group 4 and the rest of you believe community engagement is, and how we're going to utilize each one of you as the CAP to help us in our community engagement opportunities, to get your feedback as to what works, maybe what doesn't work, some ideas to consider, and then also to use you as a recruitment tool to help get people to come to some of these events, including yourselves. So that's what we did for those objectives. So with that being said, we actually have an event coming up on the 28th that a community group that we work with is wanting to host. It's going to be at the Friendship House, and we need your help. We need your participation. We need your influence to help bring people there. I let you guys know one we had in the Hill Zone a couple of months ago. This one is going to be similar to that, and it's going to be for the officers who work in the Valley Zone, which is basically East Brundage Lane, south all the way to Taft Highway, and Highway 99 to basically South Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. That's kind of our valley zone. It's a huge zone. A lot of people that work there. One of the survey that was done by the monitoring firm, when they measured the community and they measured some of the sentiment that was taking place from an independent surveyor, the valley zone was one of the areas that had some of the lowest trust towards law enforcement in the city. So one of the things that we've done is we've recognized and identified through our spider tech system, which again, that's just for people who've received our service, but looking and monitoring where in the valley zone is some of this lowest levels of trust towards law enforcement. And we've been out in those areas over the last few weeks, flyering them and letting them know, hey, can you please come out to this? We want to engage, we want to have conversations with you, and we're going to continue to do those same type of activities to try to get people to show up so we can have some of these conversations. That event is going to be basically, there's an agenda to it, but it's more to have some conversation. Let the people who live in that area talk to the officers who patrol that area so they can understand and recognize, the officers can understand and recognize what are some of the issues that are going on. Because officers see calls for service, they oftentimes maybe don't see all the other things that are going on. But just to create some dialogue, try to create some relationship, try to help build some trust, but being strategic and utilizing the different data points and the different surveys that we have both internally and externally to drive what we're doing. And I have flyers for that, and we'll get those to everyone after this. Okay. Oh, you guys got some? Great. English on one side, Spanish on the other side. So I know that was kind of a high-level view. I would like to say, like, the work that you guys put into this, like, we appreciate it greatly. And a lot of the stuff that you recommended, we felt was very much in line with what we wanted to do. A couple of modifications were made, which we discussed. So hopefully that makes sense. And this time, kind of, we can go through and have some questions and answers, or provide some feedback. We'll kind of go from there. Do you need any more information from me? Yes, sir.
Talking about this,
Yes, sir.
you said that people were out passing out these flyers in the valley zone, right?
Yes.
Who's passing it out?
Community relations. So,
Who is that? Is that uniformed officers or these?
both. Yeah. So our community relations unit, which is, I'm the lieutenant of that unit. Karina's the supervisor. We have 3 officers assigned to that unit, and we have 8 specialists who are professional staff. Here you have Janet and Noemi. They're 2 of our specialists. We have 6 more. We're hiring 1 more next week. We'll be fully staffed. And their job is to focus on community engagement. So there's an officer presence and there's also a professional staff presence. So both.
Were they literally knocking on doors and passing out on the grocery stores or what?
Typically, we'll go out to either residences, neighborhoods. We've already established like neighborhood watches in certain zones, so when it is our zone, we already have contacts. People who reach out to businesses, so we have people we already know. And then we have people that are just walking up to them like, hey, you want to share these flyers? It's how we meet people, it's face-to-face.
There's one specific place we're actually going next week. It's an apartment complex off of Coventry and Villalobos. It's an area that we typically get a lot of calls for service and generally has some fairly lower levels of trust towards law enforcement. So we're doing what's called the pop-up event out there. Traditionally, we wouldn't do these, but we recognize that the traditional ways of engaging the public hasn't always worked, and things need to change. So we proactively go out there. Usually our officers dress down into something similar to what Officer Jackson is wearing, so it's maybe a little bit less intimidating, and just to try to set up the ability and the mechanism to have people come. Now, some people will come up, some people won't. But it's just one of the many strategies that we have. And that's one of the things that we've been trying to do is really find multiple ways of doing things, not just one way specifically. Any other questions as it relates to this?
Specific goal or overall presentation?
Whatever.
Yeah. Couple of questions. One is, how much do you expect? Oh no, actually, how much of this work will be sort of like relegated specifically to the community relations department within the police department, and how much of it will be a sort of like extending to the fullness of the staff, right? So is it just going to be like 8 police officers, I think you mentioned, or 4 police officers and some specialists doing all of this work, or is it going to be sort of like a cultural shift within
Yeah, great question. So a little bit of both, right? So culturally, we have to recognize we want our officers to be some incentives for them to engage on every call for service. But the events generally, we had a community day at the park a couple of weeks ago, or 2 or 3 weeks ago. Those big events, that's what community relations does. They set up, they organize, they coordinate, they partner with other organizations to bring people out. But then we also bring our patrol officers out there and other people throughout the department to come and interact in those things. So it's the mechanism to really create the events is ran through community relations, but we bring other officers out. One of the things that we're really trying to do in the push of having officers really take it upon themselves of identifying areas that maybe we need a community event. Maybe that there's something that needs to be done in the neighborhood based off of things that they're seeing of having to go to the same house or the same neighborhood for a specific call for service. So the answer to your question is broadly is it includes everybody, but the mechanism that really helps drive it and coordinate and bring other resources along is the community relations unit. And they're going to be the ones that are housing and be able to run the data and to be able to figure out, hey, how many people are showing up? We're doing surveys. What are the survey responses? How are they? What does the sentiment look like? And then breaking that sentiment down to say, okay, what are we doing good and what can we do better at this event based off of what people are saying who actually got that service at that event, and how do we make it better for the next time? And those things that we want to do is then bring back to you as the cap to let you know, hey, this is what happened. That's why I think having you guys at those events is going to be very, very, and we're all busy. But having your participation, your influence, not just yourselves, but the people who you have influence over, show up at those events, it helps, I think, paint a clearer picture when you actually see some of these things that are happening when it comes to the data after the fact.
If no one else has another question, I have one.
Please.
How much do you expect this to cost, or the overall budget for particularly the implementation of this particular strategic plan? And do you anticipate any additional sort of like budget increases within the department in the coming 3 years?
As it relates to community engagement, this plan and things that we're looking at doing, nothing. So we have a budget specifically for community relations, and that budget looks like, it's myself, it's Karina's position, 9 specialists and 3 officers. So when we're fully staffed, we already have that money. To do these things, we have the manpower and human power to do it. We have the resources to do it. We have line items specifically for toys for kids and stuff like that. So we already have everything that we need. A lot of it is now just going out and physically doing it. And then the documentation after the fact and the annual reports to show this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, some of the challenges that we faced, and then some of the victories and the wins that we got.
I think just following along the same lines would be, I don't know if this is also available within like the public city sort of like portal of the budget, but it would be great to get a sense just so that we all kind of understand what the financial aspect of what this is going to cost. And I'm imagining part of that doesn't just come from like city council money, but also from grants and stuff like that you all have applied for over the course of the last few years.
Yeah, so I think the majority of our money does come from the regular budget. We have applied for some grants. One of the big ones that we're working on right now is actually a vehicle that we can make it, it's like a van that we can sell, we can give ice cream out of, we can serve coffee out of, we can do pop-up events where we go to different community members, and if it's the wintertime, we can serve coffee and it has BPD stuff all over it, and it's inviting, and we can have people come up and have some conversation. It's inviting, and in the summertime, we can do ice cream and popsicles and those types of things. We've never done that before, and most agencies don't do it. Those things are going to be funded by grants, and I know the AC's been working hard on that, so hopefully that gets approved. But generally speaking, the majority of our budget comes from the regular general fund.
Okay.
With both too, with training, do you guys know exactly what role you're wanting the partners to play in this one? Like the community professionals, the educational institutions, and then the criminal justice stakeholders? Do we know what role we're wanting them to play in this? Is it during the academy? Is it your in-service training? Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things we want them to do, and we identified it in Objective 1, is community members and community organizations. They possess extensive subject and neighborhood-specific expertise that we could benefit from. So bringing in diverse voices from outside the department plays a vital role. in specific areas, and specifically to both academy training
Mm-hmm.
and in-service training.
Okay.
So all of it.
So all of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I really am happy to see that it went from 8 objectives to 3. I mean, it really is so much easier to follow. But I have a question about one of you said, and I'm also very happy you're going to use community trust as part of the performance evaluations, but how will you find out how people are doing? What is your way of, how will you know? Other than you get complaints, but those are not the good ones.
Sure, yeah. So from a variety of situations. One is we identify which officers are going and volunteering and coming to community events, right? Which officers are showing up when we have our event in 2 weeks, who's showing up, right? And when they show up, what are they doing, right? Do they stand, and we like to call it the blue huddle, right? That oftentimes you see officers and they stand in a circle with each other, right? But are they openly, actively engaging, right? And that's on my responsibility and anybody there who's in a leadership position. But also, it's going to be setting the culture of what are the patrol sergeants seeing on a daily basis when officers are out doing patrol work, right? Because that's where the majority of our interactions are taking place. Community events, they're all fantastic. But what's happening on a daily basis? So our supervisors are going to have to be documenting, because when you do a performance evaluation, a sergeant may remember certain things, but they also need to be documenting certain things. And are they meeting the standard or are they not meeting the standard? Just like if an officer shows up and an officer is rude, and a sergeant sees that, they're going to address it, and they should be documenting it at some point. If it's the first time, maybe it's a conversation. If it's the second, third, fourth time, maybe there's some written documentation like, hey, you were rude, knock it off. If we're seeing them doing positive engagement, those things need to be rewarded. So from a multitude of fashions. People are calling in and saying, hey, this officer did a great job, right? Through Spider Tech. Just again, another one of the many tools that we use, but if somebody's calling in and saying this officer was great, if an officer is doing great, and we follow up on that, and it's reviewed by the lieutenant, and the lieutenant says, hey, yeah, this looks like they were engaging and doing well, that's what we want. We reward them. The same thing with negative behavior. That's dealt with too. So multiple facets.
So I have one question. When we say the academy training, what's exactly, could you explain the academic training, how it works?
Sure. So our academy is broken down into 41 or 42 different learning domains. And a learning domain is basically a topic that relates to law enforcement. It's mandated by the state. The state tells us how much time we have to teach on each subject. Each instructor has to go through specific training related to each topic. And the academy is roughly 5.5 months long. So our academy right now is in week 3, I believe. So they go through a 6-month or 5.5, 6-month academy, and then they graduate. Throughout that academy, they're taught a variety of different things. So one of the things that we're wanting is people from the community who have this expertise and knowledge related to specific areas of the academy to be able to go in and provide that instruction, as opposed to just having officers do all the instruction. And that's a very, very high level view. We can talk in depth with I was actually very blessed to be the academy coordinator for an academy, to be able to oversee and manage everything. So we can talk in granular if you need to, but generally speaking, that's how it works. Yes, sir.
So this is still labeled as draft, but obviously it's been revised and updated. What's the plan for rolling this out? When and how are you guys going to publicize it?
Yeah.
To do it?
Thank you. So here would be my plan. Is we've presented it back to you guys. Hopefully, when you see it, you see that it's sufficient. Is we also want to give the community an opportunity to look at it as well. The same thing we did with the proposed canine policy is provide a 2-week window where the community can review it. We'll put it out on social media, we'll do a press release, and we'll put it on our website and give the community whatever time you guys, I was thinking 2 weeks to look at it and provide any recommendations and see what those recommendations are. After that, depending on what the recommendations are, we want to go live with this, because this is now going to be a document that we are going to reference in all the things that we do. It's going to drive our community engagement and allow us to really make sure we're staying on track. We will, once it's approved, then we will put it on our transparency page. We'll have it viewable to the public, and it will be open for everybody to view.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
On that one, on the rollout. Because you do have, the elderly folks that really don't go home hearing, like all of these things that we need to make sure we're engaging all of our communities regardless of, disabilities or whatever. So how are we able to give this same information to all of those people that wouldn't normally go through those types of medias to make sure they have what they need also for, to make sure we're engaging all of our community?
Sure. We definitely want to engage all of our community, and we know that some people have limited access. What do you suggest? What would be some possible avenues to mitigate that? The best that we can. Knowing that we're not going to have everybody, just like with the Canine policy that we put out. We know not everybody is going to either want to or have access to it, but we want to make sure that we're being as inclusive as we can to make sure that we're doing everything we can within our scope to make sure that there's access. But what would be some recommendations?
To be honest with the seniors, we do have senior centers around here that we can possibly talk to some of those folks there and possibly get a copy or two of this to them there. Because I know our seniors want to be engaged in all of this stuff too, to figure out where to find it. And to be totally honest with you, if you're going to do this to where you have this for those folks that are sight and hearing impaired, this is gonna have to have one of those things where it has the ADA approval where they can hear it online for those people that have those issues. And make sure that the color palettes and all this stuff is actually adhering to the folks that are visually impaired also. We have to go through it all the time in education and make sure we adhere to everybody, so everybody gets that information. So there are ways to do it. I'm just always concerned that I know not everybody gets it, but those people that are interested, that have those disabilities, should be able to access it.
And I don't know how many senior centers, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud, I don't know how many senior centers there are in town, probably a lot. If you happen to know somebody or you guys would like extra copies, we can provide those. And if there's specific places that you think would be more beneficial than others, you can drop those things off. I recognize we have a diligence and responsibility to make sure that we're trying to do everything we can to make sure that everybody that we can possibly foresee has access to it. But I also recognize too that making sure every single person in this community, which is a very large community, doing that is going to be a challenge.
And not so much making sure every single person, but those people that may still have those disabilities, or that the senior does want it and doesn't have access to a computer, how do I get that information? Or for those persons that are sight or hearing, if I want to find the information, how do I get it to where I have access to it? Because then we would be doing them a disservice if they're not able to get it if they're looking for it. Because there are going to be people looking for it, not necessarily appeasing everybody, but those that want it are able to get it no matter what. I think is was where I was going with that one.
I have a question. How does the college do that? How do you get to the people who are visually impaired? A document like this?
We actually have to go through a whole entire matrix. That's why I know it's probably gonna be a little more difficult, because some of us even have to go through training to make sure that everything that we do has it. So we have this, what is it? It's Adobe Adobe has a program.
So, but the access point is usually whatever the learning platform is used. And so
Yeah.
we have to make sure that we provide that,
Yes.
that service through the learning platform.
Yes.
But unfortunately, Long Beach doesn't have a platform to disseminate information like education.
Yes.
So it's not as quite as relatable, but I would say like a lot of older people watch the news as opposed to go online. So,
Mhm.
so disseminating it through the media such as,
Yes.
all the news stations, Bakersfield, California, California. So, I think using some of those alternate sources other than social media, which I'm sure you engage and you use. I've seen the chief on the news quite frequently as well. So, just as another avenue, I think it would take a little bit more brainstorming to try to figure out
Yes.
how to reach everybody in the community, especially those with disabilities. don't have a platform like we do in education
Yeah.
where we do have to provide the same services, so it's just a little different. But yeah, I would say the news.
Yeah, definitely, and well, one of the things we'll do is we will do a press release, which we do with anything that goes out to the community, and release it to the main media, whether they choose to run with it or not, that's.
I have a potential suggestion, and then I want to get back to you if you want. But as well as like making this available in printed format, right, like PDF printed and like language access issues, right? But we already discussed like how to go about addressing those. But maybe having like a video PowerPoint presentation that can then be translated into different languages, probably available on YouTube, right?
YouTube also, I mean, you could do a demonstration on YouTube,
Yeah.
and they do have a way of translating it, and so, you know,
that ADA,
of course,
accessible,
So that
yes.
would be a suggestion, is like getting those people who may not be able to read it, right, they can listen to it and then be able to access it in different languages as well, you know, closed captioning, right? Or sometimes, right, like, I don't wanna read a 20-page document, like, let me put it onto my headphones and I'll listen to it, right? So, yeah, that might be a
That's good feedback, it's definitely stuff to consider, and we'll definitely.
You said there's a period of time for some suggestions. How long is that window for us? And then we also wanted to see your thoughts on that same window, but for the community at large.
Yeah. My thoughts were if we posted this thing online tomorrow or the next day to give 2 weeks. Since this is kind of a more polished version with a lot of things that were already incorporated, would 2 weeks of a response from you guys to review and send information back, would that be adequate?
I would guess.
Because one of the things we really want to do is we want to be very intentional with time. We want to be very intentional with getting this work that we've all put in, that you've all put in, and taking the time to review to the point where we're getting things going. So I would envision 2 weeks.
Yes.
Any other questions, folks? All of you have my phone number? Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to have a kind of community forum, you know, just maybe one night, like an hour or 2 hours, where the public can come and give verbal feedback, like on communication, as to like, what is this? Why are we doing this now? How is this going to be implemented? How are we going to pay for it, right? Like some very questions that John posed earlier. How is this going to affect what controls are receiving or not? Right? And I'm not thinking something like super elaborate, but as opposed to just like a 2-week open window of emails or possible virtual feedback, like just one night, you know, here's this plan, come talk to us.
Do you think the community would be interested in joining either like a town hall meeting or even virtually to hear information about the strategic plan?
I think we need to get more people involved with it in that case, yeah. Whether it's
Any other thought?
maybe, I don't know.
Virtual, I think virtual.
Excuse me, ma'am?
Virtual, I think, would be good, because
Virtual.
during COVID, we had to do it virtual, like we had one that she shared about, everybody, that we could video, you know, if we have quite a bit of contact with maybe newspapers.
Okay.
So I think virtual, because people, it's hard to get them to come out.
Okay.
Or at your community, at this one, have you thought of sharing some of these ideas with the community at your events? I think that would be a great way of exposing these ideas and your agenda to especially communities that may not understand what you're doing to improve transparency.
To answer your question, yes, definitely. I wouldn't be opposed. We facilitated several listening sessions. One was with the monitor and what the stipulated agreement looked like as it was kind of rolling out. We did an informational session on that. We did one with how to record a police officer legally and some of the things to consider. I'm not opposed. I don't think we would be opposed to doing something like that virtually, to be able to set up with them, you know, if you guys think it's valuable. Again, time is important, but I want to, you know, hear from you guys. We don't want to spend time doing things that aren't valuable. So that's why I want to utilize you guys as that mechanism to help guide us. Is it valuable?
Instead
Yes,
of
sir.
looking at
Frankly, I don't think anybody's. I think this should be up, I think it's important to have the document as sort of a touchstone, but my guess is that for something like this, you're not gonna get a great deal of interest or turnout. I think for policy changes, that may be a very different story, and I think people are gonna be very interested. So maybe there's gotta be some, or maybe there can be some way to gauge whether there is interest in having a community event focused around this. And if so, then do it.
Yes, sir.
So, kind of going over my head, the idea of like creating additional events, but I just kept going back to the idea of you should just go ahead and put it into your existing events. But if the entire point of this is to sort of create, to communicate these changes, communicate what the CAP is doing for those policy changes, to build trust, like you said, in those particular zones, which you know of, right? Why not go ahead and just start building the infrastructure where you are having a quarterly meeting at the Friendship House, and that just happens to take place, and you can cover whatever items are on the agenda that day, and it becomes just an ongoing meeting. And likewise, the CAP is invited, we can attend. Likewise, we can speak for ourselves, but it's the idea of just, it's an ongoing meeting, rather than everything's, you know, as is next Thursday, that type of thing. So I would recommend just anything that can be ongoing and better. And that's where you can share it. And I think that's the biggest thing is that, you know, especially dealing with like a canine policy, you're gonna have people who just don't know anything. And so that's your opportunity to educate them. Likewise, our opportunity to be able to share, you know, where we had some input and advisory and go from there.
Okay.
Are we talking about something in the future, or are we talking about now? Because I think I'm hearing two different sides. The issue of the policy is to find out something that needs to be done now. If you open it up to the community, you open up where this is not gonna be resolved now, we're gonna drag this thing out. You are the community. You're supposed to be speaking on the people that you're dealing with. So if you're gonna open it up to the community and start giving voice to everything, you're gonna open up where now, you wanna go throw this in the trash and you get ready to waste my time and everybody else's time, because now too many inputs is not what you're trying to get. You're the everyone in here was a representative of the community. You have a voice for it. If you go out and get that community input, you're supposed to bring it back. But if we open it up at every event and let people come and say everything, I think you're gonna have more than you bargained for, because no one's gonna agree to everything.
I think moving forward and just kind of with a little game plan, and tell me what y'all think, is if we make this live on our website for community feedback via email, and we release it to the media and do it on our social media announcing, hey, go to the website, check it out. We have a community event already planned next week, and the plan is we're gonna continue to have community events in all of our different zones. And while those events are designed to have officers engage with community members, there's also going to be discussion that comes up about specific things that we're working on with the CAP and so forth. And those could be those events that that are already being planned, that we're going to have, that aren't in addition to, but they're all encompassing. And we can talk about things that we've done, things that we're doing, and things that moving forward, kind of where we want to go. Does that sound like that's a viable option moving forward? And if we did 2 weeks of it live on the website, and then 2 weeks for any additional feedback from you, and then we can at that point kind of see where we're at, and then potentially make it go.
I do believe when she was making a suggestion on the town hall or something via video was to cut down to 2 weeks, because then it would just be a one night kind of event.
Oh, no, I was like saying within the 2 weeks, but I was also just throwing that out.
Okay.
For discussion.
Because for me, it would cut down to 2 weeks of having it open to the community and get this done faster than just one
But I
kind
think
of
we run
thing.
into the same problem, right, of like people not showing up, people not having rights, people not having internet access, right? So we get into those accessibility issues again if we just shut it to one night. I think if it were all or nothing, like I would personally prefer a 2-week open period and keep virtual staff, like we're doing all or nothing.
Okay.
And I think that the discussion that we've had here is for the viability of the forum, whether or not that's valuable.
And is our 2 weeks separate from the community 2 weeks, or is it all the same?
I would mention it being the same, because if we didn't push out another 2 weeks, then we're talking about it. And with that being said, I know the assistant chief's going to come up in a minute and talk about the canine policy, which is a huge lift, right? It's a lot of work, a lot of review, a lot of information. And when we start doing, we have all this work, like it can be very, very burdensome. And I can imagine from your perspective too, like we don't want to overwhelm you. We want to make and create a system and an environment where we're set up for success. And just getting too much review on things I know can be difficult. So we don't want to overwhelm that either. So I want to be very, very intentional about that as well. Yeah. So here's what we'll do. If you guys are okay with this. We will get this live on our website either tomorrow or the next day for review. I'll talk over with the assistant chief. Chief Terry will be back next week. We'll discuss with him and figure out if there's anything additional we want to do. Not necessarily opposed to a town hall virtually, but definitely I know we have mechanisms set up where we will be out in the community talking about these things at the different events that we're doing, and then we'll respond as to kind of what we plan on doing via email and let you guys know, but also seeking your feedback as well. And we'll come up with a 2-week window, it's like 2 weeks from today. If you have any additional responses with regards to this document, to please let us know. Is that fair?
Can we get an email link when you guys go live? And the only reason why I'm asking, because I share stuff on my Facebook all the time. If this is something we're trying to get out to our communities, I do it. So getting a link or getting something or even a little blurb for us to kind of spread that word also, for me would be helpful.
Absolutely. Again, folks, thank you for your work that you gave. It really helped us to create this, and it sounds like it's in line with what was envisioned, and I think it's a good thing moving forward, and it's the first step for us to actually, this is the first piece of the document that we really have gotten done and reported back, and I think we're really moving in the right direction, and hopefully that we can now build on that momentum and take it over to the canine side of things with that policy. So, thank you very much.
It is 7 o'clock. Do we want to keep going, or do you want to take 3 or 4 minutes? Use the restroom, food? No? So if you need to go to the bathroom, just go ahead and get up and go. Yeah, it was neat for me to be able to see a lot of feedback that came from the different working groups for the community engagement plan. Each working group gave like a page, 2 pages of feedback from the presentation. So our hope is that we can get there with the canine policy. And as Ryan talked about, you guys are getting to know each other. You're learning who's the most vocal, who wants to be in charge, who doesn't, who's the one that's good at taking notes, who's the one that is good at responding via Google Doc or via Word doc, so that you guys are forming and becoming more fluid to that respect. And my hope is that we'll even get better as a group, and as these policies start to go through these processes, we can start having timelines that are maybe a little bit sooner without creating more work, but just the process is a little bit more seamless. So we're getting there, and we will continue to get there. So what I wanted to talk about tonight was the canine policy, and last month, Sergeant McWilliams provided an overview, very global overview of the policy. You were provided a copy of the draft policy, our current policy, the stipulated judgment compliance measures with a relation to where they fall into the policy, where we believe they fall into the policy to meet the requirements of the stipulated judgment. Part of your responsibility in being part of this Chiefs Advisory Panel is to look at just that. Did we meet the requirements of the stipulated judgment based on our changes in our policy? We want your opinion as to whether or not we did. And how you do that is through your four groups. Whether we did meet it, whether we didn't, what you think we need to do to meet it to fall in line with what is written down in the stipulated judgment. Just a little history. So we have a team of individuals from the department. You have Captain King over here to your left, Sergeant McWilliams, Captain Woolard, and Lieutenant Dossie over here, and a few others from the department that have been involved in the revamp of the canine policy. You have Deborah Kirby over here to your right from Jensen & Hughes. She and her team have also been involved in a several month, I don't know how many months it's been, but you might know, process of communicating back and forth via email, communicating back and forth via in-person meetings, including Chief Terry and some of the quality assurance team here. Brian Holcomb is here, and a couple others that are here from the team have all been working on these different policies, and specifically the canine policy, to get us to where we're at now, to get us to where we were at last month, to bring to you what we believe follows law, follows best practice, follows the and meets the requirements of the stipulated judgment as it relates to the compliance measures. Now we're looking for your feedback based on the folks that you engage with and interact with in the community, based on your interpretation of the law. Some of you have various backgrounds where you are maybe an expert in that area, or just your personal opinion based on your assessment of the policy, based on your assessment of the law, based on your assessment of the stipulated judgment and the compliance measures. We want your feedback. So part of the plan will be the same as it is with the community engagement. Once we get all of your feedback, we will go through, do something similar to what Ryan took you through, to this exchange of information, and we'll get to a draft where we're comfortable putting it out to the community for their input. So last month, Sergeant McWilliams asked that we divide up into 4 different groups, and I don't have a copy for everybody, but you all should probably have this. So the 4 groups were, group number 1 was personnel and responsibilities. Group 2 was operational guidelines. Group 3, training. And group 4 was administration. I can pass around a few of these that I have just so that you can refresh your memory. Like I said, I don't have one for everybody, but and so we did get some feedback from a couple individuals, and I believe from a group, I'm not 100% certain. Feedback consisted of a number of things, from changing verbiage from will to shall, changing the whole philosophy of the purpose of the canine unit, the use of the dog, the canine, whether it's a deadly force tool or a injuring force tool. Got basically a whole revamp of the policy, and that has not been shared with the group because it came from one group. What I'd like to see happen tonight is I would like to just divide you up and have someone, you're the leader of group 2, you're the leader of group 3, so on and so forth, but I'm not going to do that. I want you guys, as I mentioned at the very beginning, you're getting to know each other a little bit better, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, to where you can come together and divide up into those groups. Just because you're assigned to, say, the operational guidelines of the use of the dog, doesn't mean that's the only thing you can look at. But for whatever group you're assigned to, it's important as that group, the part of that group, to focus on the sections that we've identified for you to look at and review and provide feedback to. And in addition, if you want, you can go outside your group and provide your own feedback or give your feedback to another group regarding their area of concentration. That is okay. We can't control that. I don't want to, because we want all of you to be able to provide input to our policy. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here, right? So, how did we do as a CAP, Chiefs Advisory Panel, in breaking up into groups? I remember it happening a little bit last month, but I don't have a full grasp of what exactly
Very
happened.
difficult, because last month, some of us wanted to stay in the same groups that we were in for the community security, but other people didn't want to, so it was left just kind of, don't know. Then the way to sign up did not work. Had to write
The
down
Google Doc?
several times, it didn't sign up. A lot of people weren't here, so it was very frustrating. I mean, I was in group 2, and we are the ones who gave you some input, because we met 2 times.
The operational
Some of
guidelines.
the groups
Okay.
didn't need it all, and I think we were left because we were left not knowing what to do, kind of like, because several said, let's just, because we have a structure, let's keep it. But, not everybody wanted to, and so it was just left unknown, so it was kind of frustrating.
Okay. Anybody else have an idea? And maybe rather than a complaint session, and I'm not saying you're complaining, Kathleen, I appreciate your candor 100%. But how do we get there with the people that are here tonight?
I still think we need to choose which area you want it, because even though the Google Sheet was a little difficult, I still emailed and let them know what group I did want to be in. So if we were having difficulties, that may be something we still want to do. And I know we have a list of phone numbers, that's one thing I need to find, because I only have one other person, I think, that's in group 3. And I wasn't here when the Canine policy was presented, so I probably had some questions after going through them, but I got it answered tonight, so
Okay.
I should be fine moving forward with whoever is going to be in the training part of group 3.
Is that what you want? I'll put it up here. So I am going to open up for questions in just a minute, but what I want to do is just I wanted to get your minds thinking about the groups. So, because when I'm done talking, after we're done answering questions, that's going to be the expectation that you guys kind of figure that out and divide up into your groups so that we can continue on. And I'll give a little more expectations as it relates to what the expectations are referring to the canine policy. So it's not easy, and sometimes you have people who are the type A personality, the one that wants to type. There's the one that wants to just go with the flow, provide some input. There's the one that doesn't want to do anything, and there's the one somewhere in the middle. And so hopefully, like I said, as you guys are getting to know each other a little better, you'll maybe have some balance. Try to create balance amongst the group so you have a balanced team as we go through these processes. Because as Ryan said, it's a lot of work. There was a lot of work that was put into the policy feedback that we got. And that particular group used Microsoft Word and strike through, highlights, and remarks on the side. It was easy to see and easy to read for the most part. So we did get that review back on, the chief sent me an email on Saturday. I have yet to review it in its entirety. I've skimmed over it. There was a page, I was at the beach on Saturday and Sunday, so I apologize. But someone provided, I think in conjunction with that, there was a page or page and a half long kind of memorandum, I think summarizing it. So I've got some general ideas of what the recommendations are, but not into the nitty gritty enough to go through line by line with you all tonight. And that's not the intent for tonight or the purpose of tonight's meeting, to go into that detail. And then there was an email kind of summarizing some of the same stuff that was on the policy review with some additional information. So some good feedback, stuff that I've looked at and think, well, we should do that. For example, someone corrected the decimal system that we use in our policy. And I didn't look at the rest of our policy, because if in fact we do go with that, we may have to revamp the whole damn policy. So I don't know, I need to look at it. And I felt kind of ignorant looking at that as I went through, okay, that can't be right. I went through 1 and then 2, 3, all the way to 10, and this doesn't make any sense. So thank you for that feedback. And so I think Captain Willard wanted me to thank you all for schooling us on the decimal system. So after questions, I'm going to ask you to divvy up into groups. So as we're going through and people are asking questions, please be thinking about that so that when we break, we can maybe get a little bit of work done tonight as to the review of the policy. Chuck?
Yes. It seems to me that the meat of this is the operational guidelines. And personnel, training, administration have to follow the operational norms and guidelines that are established. And I think that that group that worked on operational guidelines has put out a lot, and that we might use our time best tonight to start going through at least memorandum points, because everything else, if you make some of the changes that are asked for, then that means training, administration, and maybe personnel are going to change. So, you know, those groups need to follow, in my opinion, the decisions about the operational guidelines.
I don't want to disagree with you. I think I value your input. I know you disagree with me sometimes, so I guess we'll be even on this one. So I think that in order to move from the revamp, the reform, the redo of a policy to practical application, training, potentially you brought up the movement of personnel. I think everything has to be done at the same time because everything influences everything. And that's why it's important as we go through these policies, because the next policy could be the taser, the next one could be impact weapons, and the next one could be the use of the police vehicle and how it's used in a pursuit or something along those lines. There's going to be so much work. People are going to have to, even though you may be so passionate about the operational component of the policy, to be able to just step back and not be specifically engaged with that particular group and focus in on other areas, because those are just as important. The administration of a policy, the personnel responsible for enforcing the policy, if not, are more important than the actual policy itself. We can have our employees read it and know it and take an exam and take a test on it and pass it, but if the people who are running the show, holding people accountable, aren't doing their job, then it's not going to work. And so those other areas that Ryan broke the policy into, to me, are equally important. They're all equally important. They're all important. There isn't one that's not important. And so what I didn't want to do tonight was try to go through the recommendations, because there's a number of you, and maybe you've all seen them and read them, I don't know if you have, but it didn't turn into a debate. I would like to get feedback on the entire policy first. So the plan is you guys break up into your groups, continue reviewing the canine policy, and I think it's, is it July 11th, the next one? Yeah, July 11th I think is the next one. Come back to the table then, so you got 4 more weeks. So you have 2 weeks to do the review of kind of getting close to the final draft of the community engagement policy, coupled with some of the things that were talked about here, different ideas. I would imagine that's going to be part of our conversation, and how do we take Tiffany's ideas and Tabitha's ideas as to some of these things with the community engagement policy. But tonight when you leave, the task is to continue the review of the canine policy and bring that back. If it comes back before, that would be awesome, so that we can start reading it and then be able to come back with a response. Because frankly, there's going to be things in there that you all are wanting that we're not going to do. And I want to be blunt, because I think it's important to be transparent in that. It's not, and there's things that you're going to recommend that we want to do, that we are going to do. We're going to applaud you for your great idea. And that's what I want to be able to come back probably in August. And I don't remember the date in August. So review the canine policy over the next 4 weeks. Come back with recommendations. We'll engage in a deeper conversation July 11th about the policy, about some of the specifics. Probably not a line by line, but a little bit closer to a line by line than we're going to do tonight. And once we're done with that, then August we will come here and have put together some type of presentation that shows a little bit of both. This is what we had, this is what you recommended, this is what we did. This is what we had, what you recommended, and why we didn't do what you recommended. So there's going to have to be that kind of two-way street conversation. And ultimately, it's not going to be my choice, and it won't be yours. It's going to go to Deborah and to the Department of Justice, who's going to decide whether or not that particular paragraph that we like, you guys don't like. It's going to be up to them to determine how it's going to land. Kind of a combo. So, but we can't move forward. We can't do it without your input, right? So.
Will they have access to all the input?
Yes, yes.
even
So it's
things
incumbent
that-
upon the group to provide,
Okay, even things that you don't like, they'll at
Yes.
least know, be aware that they came up.
yes, of course. That's the transparency component, right?
Should,
That's why you have a representative from Jensen who's here to hear the conversation, and then the digital conveyance information is also shared.
should we be sending directly to them then, like the things that we did in year two? Should we be sending directly to the monitor?
Or you can if you want. But what we have been doing is, so for example, when we look at the compliance measures as a team from the police department, we look at them, we meet on them, we talk, what do we need to change, how are we gonna change it, how are we gonna word it, and we meet on it. It takes a lot of effort. We've spent hours coming up with what we've provided thus far, and days. And we go through and we think this fits, this meets all these requirements. This fits, this meets law, case law. This fits and meets industry standard. What are other agencies doing and not doing? We look at all that. What are the industry experts recommending? And we give that to Jensen Hughes. Yeah. So it's not a constant communication back and forth with every little change and every little recommendation. It's more of a package that goes.
But I mean, our final thing that we suggest that we go with that.
Yes.
So then my understanding is that you will all vote over our revisions, and that the ultimate decision on what gets selected will be Deborah or Jensen.
It's a combination of everything. So, okay, so if there's something, if there's like a paragraph that the group is adamant, this is what we want, and this is why we want it based off of these 10 things, okay? We don't want that. We want it written this way, and we want it written this way because of these things. Jensen Hughes disagrees, okay? I'm being hypothetical, okay? The Department of Justice disagrees with us, with the police department. The next step, if we went down that road, we could go to court. And then a judge could either chop up the paragraph and make it written differently, or pick a side. So that's kind of the full circle part of the process. Ideally, we can meet in the middle on things that we disagree with. Like I said, it's a two-way street, and the same thing goes with Jensen and Hughes and the the monitoring team and the Department of Justice. So we don't have to do that. I don't want to do that. But I would be naive, and I would be blowing smoke to sit here and tell you that there's not going to be something through this whole entire stipulated judgment that's going to go there. You know, so I don't know what that is. I don't want to do that. I would rather work it out in the group and with the monitor and DOJ if need be. So, and that's kind of what we've been doing. There's things we've gone back and forth on over and over, and we've settled one way or the other. So.
I'm just trying to get a sense of the decision making.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll open it up to questions about the policy. Like I said, Captain King's here, Captain Willard, Lieutenant Dossie, and Sergeant McWilliams. And if I can't answer the question, I'm going to lean on them to help me out. So, yes, Kevin.
I love to do research, so I tried to do as much research as I could on policy, so best practices, all of those things. And it's really difficult with canines because there's not a lot of research that has been done on canines. I only came up with one actual scientific study, and it was regarding whether a barking pool or bite pool was actually had more
I don't disagree with, anybody's research still is not black and white, because there's opinion in there, unfortunately, as you know that, as being an educator. Case law, for example, it changes, I mean, it probably changes every day to some respect, and attorneys have a hard time interpreting. I have a hard time interpreting, and I think sometimes a judge does too. That's why there's a judicial process for the checks and balances. And so I'd be interested in you sharing that document that you've read regarding the bark and hold versus the bite and hold.
I have it, and I did also email it to Beth. I
Okay.
emailed it to the department earlier.
Okay.
Also, and I also shared it with our operation, and I shared it with our operational team. I also found a legal review, again, based on canine policy. That was 50 pages, so I did not print all of that.
Okay. So my question, oh, go ahead.
So like I said, and then I also, of course, used other agencies' policies and just tried to gather as much information as I could. Like, unfortunately, I didn't find the answer. That's I wish I had the answer, but I haven't exactly found the answer. But I did come up with some information that I think, because, for example, this one also discusses training. This one about barking and biting.
Right.
Also talks about the importance of training, so I feel like the training section could really benefit us with some of the information.
Yeah, so, yeah, and what I would ask of you, because we have put a lot of work into, which one do we put in policy?
It does, but it does.
There's a lot of conversation about like how training should be used, when it should be used, and whatnot. But I think part of the rule is versus like writing.
I do understand that.
But I am curious about this, like,
I have been looking, so if you have any research, because, no, because I am a research person, I find that, you know, to try to find out, and, you know, I mean, they have some explanations, I mean, when you read it, I don't like, paraphrase everything, I want to allow everybody the opportunity to interpret what the document says and why like hold was, had a less outcome. And you can read that in there, but there's some perspective on that. Also, different types of training. Okay, I've never had a canine. When I say
Talking like a language?
yeah, it's
But they're all
specific.
all the dogs are,
training.
they're trained in different, depends where the dog came from and what language they were brought up.
Okay, they were,
Schutzen? Schutzen's a,
So, Schutzhound's training, in the dog's background is found to reduce bite ratios. The Schutzhound is a method of breeding dogs that are performing a series of complex functions, and all competitions are off lead, and the dogs are under the voice and control of handlers. To perform at this level requires a great deal of training and discipline. Dogs are under handler control and are not required to make complex decisions. And so it was not surprising that the additional training and subsequent control over the dog had a direct impact on later use of force. So again, I'm not a handler, I don't know all of the
Well,
specifics, but I just wanted to.
yeah, that's great. So let me ask you this, were you part of the,
Operation.
yes,
I was, but I was on vacation for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I only just was able to provide this very.
okay. So then, what was given to us thus far it's not the final recommendation in my mind. It's, if there's something of value in there, I would encourage you to communicate with your team about bark and hold versus bite and hold. It's not 100% off the table. I mean, it's not. So, I mean, if you have an argument to say otherwise, I would like to hear it. We were a bark and hold agency before the stipulated judgment, and that's why we're still a bark and hold agency, and that's why it's in our policy is departmental. So it's just one component of what you're talking about. But there's several things you talked about there, because they could go, you know. So I would encourage you, if there are things in the policy that you're finding in your research that you think we need to amend, change, rewrite, then I would ask you to do that through your working group and just start revamping if
But like I said,
necessary
I'd
some of
like
that
to
policy,
share
the policy
all
that's
of
already
my-
been provided. And you can share it with everybody, of course, in your group, or in the CAP, right? Yeah. Yeah, so that last month, that was the ask, for this month, but because there weren't as many people here as we would like to have seen, there's been, we're not there. So now we pushed it out another 4 weeks, so. I agree. So I was a handler for 6 years. I was a sergeant of the team. I was a lieutenant and maybe a captain for a little bit of the team, and I'm still learning. I don't think that you all can look at these policies and have the expectation to yourself, maybe you will, but to fully understand what happens out on the street, what happens, how we train a dog. The only way you really get that is to be out there and be a part of it, and watching it and learning and talking to them or doing it. But your research, your perspective from the community, from people that have come to you and brought up issues with this particular type of use of force, whether it's a taser or a dog or a baton or whatever, you have some perspective that you can then read that policy and this doesn't make sense because it doesn't fit, you know what I'm saying? And then we need to amend it. But I don't think you can have the expectation to fully understand everything that we do. We're going to try to do that as we go through the policies and give you that overarching understanding as much as we possibly can. I would encourage, I'll get you. Who here has been on a ride-along? Anybody been on a ride-along? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would encourage you, whether you liked it or you didn't, to please share your experience with your partners here. Because I think folks that go on a ride-along gain a lot of value and perspective as to the department, how things work out on the street. To a degree, you get a snapshot of it, but you glean a little bit of perspective, especially as we start going through all these policies. So hold on, Robert, let me go back to Stephanie.
So, we'll submit and expect the 11th, and then on the 11th, we'll discuss hearing, and I know that we talked about, right, like, that we will, share sort of insight on some of these policies, but I think we had also talked about bringing in, folks with expertise on some of these issues to also address the CAP numbers, right? So like, we might talk about it, like as an example with like use of force, generally where like there's like I know this is separate from the use of force, but like under ABA 2, like it changed the standard for deadly and non-deadly force, and that can be really hard to sort of parse out, and I guess it's really a lot to sort of like digest sometimes, and so I think in an effort or in the spirit of being as impartial as possible, like it's important for the CAP members to also hear from other folks who work on these issues, you know, and whatnot to present on it. I'm not saying necessarily on tonight, but as we move forward, I think that's one of the things we talked about and Chief Terry had agreed to do so. But next month, the CAP members will share back their comments, or you guys will?
Yeah, I'd like to see them come back before we show up in the meeting, a couple of days before, a few days, so we have some time to get a general review of the feedback so that we can have a constructive conversation.
I mean, if folks submit their feedback like that Thursday before, that Friday before, I think that the 6th or the 7th, I realize that week is also 4th of July.
No, I know.
Folks might be on vacation.
So the 11th is the second week. Yeah, so if we could get the feedback by the 6th of July, that'd be awesome. And if stuff trickles in after, so be it. But ideally, we're able to come together and have a good conversation of, in addition to the conversation we're having here tonight, understanding of what you're recommending if we don't understand it, and vice versa, different areas where you're have issue with what we've written, then ask us rather than try to type it out and convey it, so you can hear, you know, our rationale.
But I think we still open to having that for other activities
I don't know. I don't think I was here when Chief Terry talked about that, so I'm not gonna commit to it. I don't know, I mean, so you have one person come and talk about the use of a baton,
Well,
and then, if
we
then,
want very particularly, so it would grab policy.
yeah, we'll circle back on that, because, again, I don't think that you all are going to become experts in this field on any of these things. I mean, unless you put the time in, do the research, and read, it's the only way you're gonna become a textbook expert. We could bring people in, they're gonna have their own opinion based on their research, and they're gonna come in and present how they feel about whatever it is, which may or may not be accurate, you know? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think she's very high research. I think it was like on very particular things that people who work on a particular issue area. I understand what you're saying, but they don't have so much experience, but they have experience with litigating issues or interpreting the law in a certain way. So bringing that perspective is also important for this piece of the consider to have sort of a holistic view of what not just sort of policy means and your perspective of what it, you know, how it plays out, but also how it would be interpreted in court of law or people who are impacted by certain policies. Maybe it would just result in a more complete sort of policy that takes into account all of the different community members and litigating these cases from, you know, your officers from the field, having to work with these policies and whatnot. So, sorry.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll circle back.
Wouldn't case law though, provide case law as opposed to?
I'm like, sorry, it's not always case law, it's also just like certain laws that have been passed in California that require certain like new like legal sort of thresholds versus like before, so it's just, I think sometimes it can be a lot to digest some of that information, and sometimes the wording is not the easiest to, it's not, I mean, yeah, but yes, I mean, it's always evolving, the case law is that correct, right, yeah, that's one. But I think it's more like current legislation, right, that's a little bit harder to, I mean, case law interprets certain legislation, but
Until an actual incident arises that in which case law.
but this is still subject to like, so I think at least for forming this, you're using this stipulated document as sort of like the guide, sort of the base. But there's like the way that there's like certain cases that are sort of like foundational and kind of do things in a particular way, and then cases sort of build on that, but like then having a certain foundation is what it is. And then there's like legislation that has been recently passed, at least how as it revolves around like use of force or like disclosure of certain officer information that like leads into like I think what Lieutenant was talking about earlier about internal affairs investigations, like investigating that information. So I think something like that just like focusing on like legislation, like that's currently in place and providing feedback on that.
Stephanie, if you could do me a favor and send an email to Babette, or whoever it is you email, Ryan or the group, and list based on the canine policy, what areas in there you think that what you're recommending would be of value to bring someone in and talk about?
Sorry, I wasn't talking necessarily about the canine policy, but just in general, I think we had identified like use of force, like because of the deadly,
Okay.
non-deadly stuff, and then like maybe like the eyes stuff, like we're just coming on.
Yeah, when we get to those policies, we can.
Sure. But if as we read through it, there's like moving area that would be beneficial, I'll like that.
Okay, that'd be perfect. No, you're good. I appreciate your feedback and your conversation. No worries. Does anybody else have questions about what you've reviewed thus far?
Different question, different comment, because I want to think back
back to your rival comments.
Oh, okay.
I just encourage, I'm sorry for my voice.
That's okay.
I'm quiet all day long when you think I don't have a voice. But I would encourage everybody on the panel to get involved with the Citizens Police Academy that will be coming up, I think, in December, after the first year. There are 3 of us in this group who were in that last academy. And it gives you a better understanding and better perspective of some of the comments that some people have made, in better understanding what the reality of control is being happened, not just in the ride-along, but going through a 10-week class and talking and getting to know different officers and different perspectives. Super valuable, didn't completely change how I view officers, but it certainly helped. And they don't pay you guys enough, sorry.
I appreciate that feedback. I think, Jacob.
I really want to hear about what to me is the gorilla in the room on this canine policy. And a lot of us were talking about it at length. Just why on earth there seems to be this enormous double standard between what counts as, well, the term I want to use is GPI, but in criminal law, when we're talking about self-defense, when we're talking about deadly weapons, when we're talking about anything related to degrees of force, death or great bodily injury are always lumped in together as one thing. So anything that is sufficient to count as great bodily injury or GBI is also sufficient to be in the same category as lethal force. Every time a dog, anytime a police canine engages with a human and bites their skin, that is GBI. That is lethal force. So why on earth is there a separate standard for the person being apprehended, whether they're in possession of a deadly weapon and so forth, and there's this entirely different standard for the police officer wielding the canine and unleashing that on a human. And it's just pervasive throughout this entire policy, dismissive as to the harm visited on the person that canine engages with, and totally excuses so much of the decision to release that canine and waters down some of the terms to just being nearly meaningless. Like, for example, in the stipulated judgment, there's a reference to only using that under conditions where there's a serious felony, serious offense. Well, the penal code defines what counts as a serious felony, which is defined as a violent felony. And this policy bastardizes that by making it synonymous with any misdemeanor you can think of would be sufficient. And that's just completely disparate between the person being attacked and the person allowing the attack to happen. So why are those separated like that? Why aren't we treating people like that in force, which they are?
So if somebody, just hypothetical, and I'll get there. If a community member has a pit bull and they unleash it on somebody, is that deadly force or is that assault with a deadly weapon?
That's the same. That question, is that deadly force or assault with deadly weapon? That is the same question.
Okay.
Also,
So
that pit bull is not trained by the state for the purpose of being unleashed on a human being.
okay. If an officer batons somebody, is that deadly force? Why not?
Because it's not likely to lead to death or to great bodily injury. That's the distinction.
Okay. What is great bodily injury?
It's defined in every jury instruction talking about use of force. Every, well, not many.
I'm leaning on you because I know.
Well, yeah, I
You're
mean,
an
this
expert.
is my world. This is what I know.
Uh-huh.
So the use of deadly force is defined very carefully in practically every case coming through the courts that deals with anything more than just a simple battery, and it's defined very carefully. I can pull it up.
Yeah, I don't need you to do that. I'm just trying to poke you a little bit back, not poke you, but prod your mind a little bit. So our policy is based off of case law. I'm not aware of anything that says the use of a police canine is deadly force. That's what I
don't know, but I can do research, how many, canine deployments have resulted in that? What are the numbers that?
Well, so that's the distinction that I'm making, is that if we limit deadly force to death, that is a completely different standard than what everybody else has to follow. Because in the criminal world, death is lumped together with the words or great bodily injury. So if
In
a
the,
weapon,
in the criminal justice definition for after a crime has occurred.
sure,
Okay, so, but that's.
or in the
basic-
commission of one.
In the commission of a crime, and so that's different than, just from my perspective, I mean,
Keep it
just,
going. We're good.
we're good. Okay, so, in the perspective, they had a criminal intent, they were going to do something illegal. And so as society, we want to prevent that from happening. So we want things differently in categories when we look at the person's intent to do harm to others. Whereas a police officer, or a community, like if my dog just happened to bite you, right? My
Please don't, yes.
Yes. So if my dog bit you, I didn't have a criminal intent for him to harm you, he was just upset by you. So I didn't purposely injure one to injure you, and I don't think we believe officers want to purposely injure people. That's not their job. So that's why we, maybe in criminal law, when somebody has criminal intent to hurt somebody, we want the GBI with deadly, deadly force or lethal force, whereas when we're looking at other applications, we don't apply those same terms to that same action. Does that make sense?
It does, but it's broader than that though. So
Okay.
when you're analyzing this, it's not just the intent of, for this, nobody gets to quote me on this at work, but the bad guy. Okay, I never call him that, all right.
Okay.
If you're not just looking at the intent of the bad guy, so let's say, question of self-defense, right? If somebody is attacking you, what's that phrase, bringing a gun to a knife fight,
Right,
for example.
right. You can only respond with people.
With light force.
Correct.
So if you are facing deadly force, you can defend with deadly force. If you are facing something that is not deadly force, you don't get to escalate it to deadly force.
But it also is determined on, like, if you attack me, I can use more force against you.
So a lot of factors will come into play, depending on what you know about me, depending on if I'm bigger, if I'm outnumbering you, all of that. But from the perspective of, I'm attacking you in this hypothetical, right? If you think that you need to use more force, and you're right, then that's justified. If you think that you need to use a higher level of force, and somebody disagrees with you, there's still a possibility that you have just engaged in deadly force based on the very same standards, and you're not the bad guy in this scenario. So the very same standard will be, did you engage in some force that's likely to inflict, again, it's a magic words, death or great bodily injury. So that is all
Well,
under
that
this
also
one
is
standard.
criminal. Did I have criminal intent to cause you harm more than you were going to cause me harm in the self-defense justification?
So that would ultimately be the big question, right? Whether somebody outside looking at it believes that you have it, but it is not a specific intent thing. It's not a matter of what ultimately is your intent. It's an evaluation of the level of force you use. Beyond that, the only mental state required for you in defending yourself is that you took a willful action. You did a thing on purpose. It has nothing to do
So the courts, state, you're talking about the state and federal don't say that the use of a police dog to apprehend somebody is deadly force. That's why officers aren't being charged with deadly force when they're using the policy lines out, I'll get to you in just a second. The policy lines out several things that have to go through an officer's mind. Reasonableness is one of the things that the court looks at. Was the use of this particular tool to apprehend this person reasonable? Based on the totality of circumstances, based on all these things that lead up to that ultimate decision, ideally, people comply and they surrender. For example, we're chasing someone who just robbed a bank with a gun, and they've run into here and all the lights are off and they're hiding. I would rather open that door and yell in here 3 times. I think there was a recommendation to wait 30 seconds in between. If we have information about what language the person speaks, then we give our announcements in that particular language. Ideally, after whatever period of time goes by, that person comes out. I give up, here I come, and we take him into custody, right? The police dog is a tool that's used to save officers' lives. There's documentation of that. The courts have deemed it a reasonable use of force in particular situations. As you're talking about, every situation is different, right? It's not all grouped into one lump. That tool can be used based on all of these different criteria. If these criteria are met in those individual cases, then a court could rule that it was reasonable. It was a lawful use of force to take someone into custody. And a dog doesn't have, it doesn't have hands, it uses its mouth. When a dog bites, they're trained from a puppy, wherever they come from, and when we train them to bite and hold. So potentially you could get 2 or 4 punctures in your leg or in your arm, or ideally wherever, not ideally, or wherever the dog may engage. I would rather have them engage him on the arm or the leg and cause the least amount of injury with the least amount of force that's reasonable. So get them hung on to, if you will, and officers go in, control the person, take the dog off, and be done. So you're talking 3 or 4 puncture wounds. In your opinion, does the law state that that is great bodily injury?
In my opinion, the case law would support a claim that that's great bodily injury, but to answer that directly, no, the law will never actually point to a specific thing short of death and say that is absolute great bodily injury. That's a definition that's 100% of the time reserved for the jury to determine.
Okay. So the assembly bill that went forward didn't go anywhere. Now if it made it through and that was the new law of the state of California, then we'd have to follow it, right? But we're not there, and so we're submitting to the group the draft as it is, not following that assembly bill, and the police dog is not a tool that is deadly force.
I think the assembly bill was a little bit different though, but without deviating and getting into like what that proposed, I think, we can agree to disagree on whether or not, for today's conversation
Yeah.
at least.
This is what I did not want to get in. I didn't want to do this. I want to do this in July. So.
Maybe next week we dive into it more when
Yeah.
people have read the policies, have read more of these studies, we have some of the data, that you were asking about when it has resulted in deadly force or has resulted in death or great bodily injury. There's data, and police departments are supposed to report, any sort of use of force that results in great bodily injury or death to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice publishes it up on their website, like their ERSIS data. I forget what ERSIS stands for, it's like police stuff. But they, and so there is data for like the past couple of years, not true, but I think that should be coming out soon. But,
Well, there is something now that I looked up that I sent out was, there was a study done in Indiana for a certain period of time, where they showed that 62% of the people who had canine injuries went to the hospital, 22% of the people who had where batons and tasers were used did not went to the hospital.
So every person that gets tased goes to the hospital. Every person that gets.
22%. They had serious injuries that they had to go to the hospital to be treated. Not
Okay.
because, so they were saying that the difference was that the canines were more dangerous. It's a long-term injury that happens to people is more dangerous. And this is a study they did over a period of time. You know, but I mean, I would just say that there was a difference with that.
Okay.
That should be considered. And also in some of Tausch's research, there were court cases where they considered doing this. You're right, no one's done it yet. But it's not like it hasn't been talked about. It has been talked about whether the canines could be considered doing this.
Yeah, and so just to comment on two things, and Tiffany, I'll get right to you. And you mentioned the serious injury. So everyone who gets tased, whether it's from the taser darts coming out, you go to Kern Medical for clearance. If you are batoned, you go to Kern Medical. If you are bit by one of our dogs, because of it.
This wasn't
I
talking about this
can't,
in
Kathleen, I can't talk if you're going to cut me off. Every dog that engages someone goes for medical clearance, and I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying. I want everybody to understand
You're saying
that.
now it's different. Maybe it was, this has happened several years ago.
Yeah, so I don't know what that
You're
data.
saying
But I
now
would.
that everybody goes at least once to get checked. You're saying. Is
Yes.
that what you're saying? Is that what
Yes, they do.
Okay, that's
Yes.
what I didn't. So that is.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought on the other component. I'll think of it in a minute. Tiffany?
Okay, so I'm with Robert on this one. I do advise also, everybody goes to the Citizens Academy. Cause it is a little, it's enlightening, it's useful, it'll help you get a better understanding, but the key component in that is that you also are able to discuss from your perspective the things in your community that has gone wrong, you get questions answered, so it was enlightening also, for me, because my community does not have the best relationship with law enforcement, but it was enlightening, for me to learn. I do recommend anybody asks me, I was like, everybody should do this at least once. My ride along was very eventful, and I seen just about everything on my ride along. For that 10-hour shift, we were nonstop go. I pooped out at the end. I actually fell asleep at the end because I ate and I was tired. I'm not gonna lie. But a canine was deployed during my ride along because a domestic violence situation where a knife was in hand. But that was just a bark and hold. So when he was told, you need to drop it, there's a canine here, when the canine barked, he's like, okay, I'm done with that one. So I understand sometimes if folks really, I'm sorry, nobody should want to get bit by a dog. So if you hear a canine is there, you're running the risk that you're gonna continue to run thinking you're gonna outrun a dog of getting yourself injured. I get it, but at the same time, that was just my experience from my ride along. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
So it was used for its intended purpose, and it was to get the suspect to surrender without deadlier force being used by the officer because this person actually had a weapon, and he ran.
And that's,
So,
I mean, that's one of the things that I think, I mean, one of the few tools that police have that can actually be recalled if not needed. A taser, once it's deployed, it's deployed. You know, a dog can be initiated and called off. It's one of the very few tools that police have that they can recall.
Yeah, so,
I was just.
yeah,
trying to give
Tiffany,
my
I appreciate
experience
your
to
input
ride
on
along
the,
and
yeah.
community,
It's an excellent way to either do the Citizens Academy or ride along to just, it just gives that little bit of perspective. It may not change your opinion on things, and that's okay too, but it does provide another
yes.
perspective. It's not someone standing up here preaching to you, you know? So, it's almost 8, and I'm gonna ask if there's any more questions regarding what you have reviewed thus far, but I do want to set aside time so that you guys can get into your groups, because I don't want
Yes.
to lose this opportunity while we have a captive audience, while you have a captive audience of each other.
Oh, that's very good.
to be able to,
When we get
talk.
our group, I'll just raise my hand for questions when we get our group.
Okay, Mandy.
So I was at here last time, and then the email was sent, I just went through the list, and then just picked the category. But it sounds like from the discussion, you guys kind of stayed in the groups. So if you guys can just sort, and then we can just kind of self-select as to where we want to go. I would say that might be the good thing. Because I selected my group, because nobody else was tackling administration. So I just said, okay, I'll sign up for that. So I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'll just go with it along.
So, I mean, if we're gonna do that, then we can have, almost 52, and I can't see, so. We could do personnel responsibilities over here, training right here, administration over here, and operational guidelines somewhere. So that's you, right? So if you're, okay, so this is operational guidelines over here. So raise your hand if you're part of operational guidelines group.
And where do you want training?
I'm gonna get there, I'll get there. So operational guidelines, training over here. Raise your hand if you're part of the training group. Okay, so I'm just kind of going to get this started, then I'm going to step back and let you guys try to balance this out. So administration is Manuel, Dave, administration. Okay. All right. Personnel and responsibilities, that's another group. So it sounds like we need someone to partner with Tiffany on. There's two. I didn't label them, I just kind of rattled them off. So personnel and responsibilities is over here. Who wants to be part of personnel and responsibilities? Chuck? Do you? Sure. Okay, I'll get it. So manual. And training. One last thing, guys and gals, one last thing. Again, we've kind of divided up into these groups. If you have a passion for another group, please don't hesitate to provide input on that policy, okay?
Hey, I know a lot of you guys missed last time. We provided these packets out. Does anybody want one of these? Okay, I'll bring them around. One other thing I did see in some of the comments is there was comments about securing a canine in a patrol vehicle. And we didn't talk about the patrol vehicle during the presentation last time. So I did want to tell you guys that a canine patrol vehicle is specially set up to keep the area where the dog is at in that vehicle cool. There's alarms and sensors on that vehicle so that if it gets over a certain temperature, the windows come down, fans turn on, and it notifies the canine handler via alarm, horn honking, and a text message to their phone if it gets too hot in there. So it doesn't really meet the criteria of the penal code section, locking dogs in cars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to close out. Thank you for getting into groups. Just walking around and listening to everybody, it sounds like we're having some good discussions on your particular 2B area of expertise, which is great, and I enjoy listening to that. So next meeting is July 11th, and the expectation is that July 6th, we get your comments and recommendations back in some form, whether it's on a Google Doc or Microsoft Word, something that we can use to then have a response back when we meet again in August. So again, get your recommendations and response. Again, we're looking at whether our policy falls in line with the stipulated judgment. Your opinion on that? Opinion on whether it falls along with the law, from your opinion, and whatever feedback you have either from yourself or your community contacts that you're speaking to on a regular basis. Okay? Thank you.